are two counts. Each of those counts alleges that you committed the crime of first-degree murder, a violation. If you pled guilty or were convicted of first-degree murder, the maximum penalty could be up to life in prison.
This is a case that can have massive implications. We are talking about a young mother, twin toddlers, the death penalty on the table after prosecutors claim she suffocated her children. And this is despite her initial claim that vaccines killed them. We're going to take a careful look at this case against Andrea Shaw and what caused the death of her 18-month-old twins. Welcome to Sidebar, presented by Law and Crime. I'm Jesse Weber. Out in Idaho, there is a woman who has now been indicted on 2 counts of first-degree murder for allegedly killing her twin 18-month-old toddlers after she claimed they died from getting vaccinated. We're talking about Andrea Shaw. So this is part of a June 30th statement from Chief Gary A. Marshall of the Payette Police Department. It says, quote, "The Payette Police Department announces that a Payette County grand jury returned an indictment on June 29, 2026, charging 23-year-old Andrea Shaw, formerly of Payette, with 2 counts of first-degree murder in connection with the deaths of her 18-month-old twins. On June 30th, 2026, at approximately 4 p.m., officers with the Boise Police Department located and arrested Shaw without incident. Shaw is currently being housed at the Ada County Jail pending extradition to Payette County. Upon her return to Payette County, she will be arraigned on 2 counts of first-degree murder." One thing potentially left out about her arrest, it's pretty major, if true. I will tell you, the defense mentions it in a filing. I'm going to get to it in a second. Big consideration. So Shaw made her first court appearance on July 2nd before this judge, who made it very clear what she was facing.
There are 2 counts. Each of those counts alleges that you committed the crime of first-degree murder, a violation of Idaho Code 18-4001, 4002, and 4003. If you pled guilty or were convicted of first-degree murder, the maximum penalty could be up to life in prison and or the death penalty and a $50,000 fine.
Now, by the way, on the topic of extradition, she actually waived extradition, meaning she didn't fight being brought back to Payette County, and she's being held on a $2 million bond. But I have to get a little bit more into this. This is all about cause of death, the way that I see it. This whole vaccination issue. So Shaw apparently appeared on this internet show, children'shealthdefense.tv. It's reportedly a group, Children's Health Defense, reportedly a group founded by Health and Human Services Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. The title of this segment said, "Breaking: Toddler twins born together died together following vaccinations." And this is where Shaw claimed, while sitting there with her husband, Nathaniel, that her kids died after getting vaccinated. Shaw reportedly saying, quote, "They had got their shots at the same time by 2 nurses at the same time, and they got sick." So reportedly, the vaccines at the center of this are hepatitis A, influenza, DTaP. In that interview, Nathaniel said, consulting with an Odoo expert today for free at odoo.com/sidebar. Is this going to be a battle of experts on cause of death? Is that what we're going to see? How is that going to look? I'm going to bring on an expert to discuss this in a second. But what I will say, okay, according to CBS News, Shaw's attorney, Joe Felicetti, wrote in this text message that his client, quote, "denies anything and everything, that the prosecution cannot prove the charges," adding, quote, "we will defend her with wholeheartedness." In a statement to CNN, Felicetti said, quote, "It's been 14 months and our position has been the same all along, that she did nothing to cause the death of these 2 children. She followed the vaccine schedule and they were having vaccine reactions." That seems to be the defense. And we did even kind of get a slight glimpse into the defense strategy in 2 different ways. So first, I want to mention there was this motion by the defense to reduce her bond in this case. And there was also this document. And this document also apparently revealed what I mentioned before, a major update, a major detail about her arrest. I'm going to read it to you verbatim. Quote, At the time of her arrest, Andrea had just given birth via cesarean section on June 25th, 2026, 3 weeks prematurely. So she was pregnant. The newborn spent one night in the NICU before being with Andrea. Andrea was breastfeeding and using formula until her milk fully came in prior to her arrest. The baby needs her mother to feed as she is not taking too much of the formula. Andrea's entire network of family and support is located in the Payette and Ontario area. She has worked as a life coach for her brother's business. She and her husband, Nate, moved to Boise shortly after the incident due to mistreatment after multiple negative media reports about her case. She has faithfully been in contact with my office and has done absolutely nothing to avoid being detected or open to facing potential charges. She has only lived in Payette or Boise since 2015. Andrea is sweet and quiet. She keeps to herself. She's not a threat to anyone. All of her family, as well as my office, will ensure that she appears in court to face her charges. She had claimed her innocence of these charges throughout the investigation. There are no confessions or statements that would indicate that she committed this horrendous allegation. While we have not seen any of the evidence or testimony due to the use of the grand jury, because it's a secret proceeding, at best, the state has a circumstantial case. The defense has a phalanx of expert testimony that will dispute the state's allegations. The defendant is presumed innocent of these charges until proven guilty. Bond is for the purpose of ensuring the defendant's attendance at court. The defendant is neither a flight risk nor any danger to society. Those are the two main factors. Andrea does not even have a speeding ticket or parking ticket to her name. She has no failures to appear. There is no indication of any likelihood of her committing any new crimes while out on bond. She attends church in Payette and has the support of her church family. She does not own a passport. She will agree to any conditions the court would require. She has consistently proclaimed her innocence, and this court should appreciate the fact that the state has taken a long time to make these charges while she has stayed in the area awaiting the results on the investigation. Of concern on an emergency basis is the fact that Andrea has a newborn that was born prematurely. And then they list out all these potential complications resulting from post-cesarean section, recovery period, breastfeeding, blood pressure, hemorrhage issues, and it ends. The defense would ask this court or the district court to immediately reduce the bond to a manageable amount of bond to $100,000. Now, as far as we could see at the time of this recording, there was no word yet on if the prosecution responded or what decision the judges made. Her next court appearance is set for July 14th. Now, I want to put that to the side. That's the criminal case, which again, we're going to get into. But there is something that is related. There is something that may give us an indication about the defense's case, something that may affect it. There is a civil case. Shaw is part of a federal lawsuit that was filed on January 21st, 2026, so months before her arrest, where she, along with Children's Health Defense, are suing the American Academy of Pediatrics. They accuse the AAP of racketeering, basically engaging in an illegal operation for what they claim is, quote, its central role in an enterprise that has defrauded American families about the safety of the childhood vaccine schedule for several decades. And this is a lawsuit for violation of the RICO statute, conspiracy to violate the RICO statute. And in this complaint, there is a description of what Ms. Shaw allegedly went through. I have to wonder if this is going to be verbatim to what she may claim at a trial, her criminal trial, right? If she takes the stand or what evidence would be presented by the defense or what their narrative would be, what their argument would be. And I have to imagine it has to be consistent with the civil case, right? If you say something in the criminal case that is entirely inconsistent with the civil case, that's going to affect it dramatically, no? So let me read you verbatim what it says in this lawsuit. Quote, Andrea Shaw is the mother of fraternal twins Dallas and Tyson Shaw, who both died May 1st, 2025, 8 days after receiving their 18-month vaccines. On April 23rd, 2025, both twins were administered hepatitis A, influenza, and DTaP vaccines at their pediatrician's office in Payette, Idaho. Prior to vaccination, Mrs. Shaw and her mother-in-law warned the pediatrician about a family history of adverse reactions to the flu vaccine on the father's side. The pediatrician dismissed these concerns, consistent with AAP's contraindications framework, which does not generally recognize family history of vaccine reactions as a basis for delaying or declining vaccination. The following day, April 24th, 2025, both twins were brought to the St. Luke's emergency room with severe symptoms, including blue lips, lethargy, and sunken eyes. The treating emergency room physician documented the diagnosis as, quote, post-immunization reaction initial encounter. On May 1st, 2025, both Dallas and Tyson Shaw died. Their autopsies are pending. No alternative cause of death has been identified for either child. Remember, this was before the charges. Rather than investigating the documented post-immunization reaction as a potential cause of death, local authorities opened a homicide investigation targeting Mrs. Shaw. Prosecutors have theorized that she caused her children's deaths through a postpartum blackout or that the house was too hot. This criminal investigation is a foreseeable consequence of AAP's fraudulent safety claims when the medical system has been told that vaccines cannot cause serious injury or death. Grieving parents become suspects rather than victims. Plaintiff Shaw's injuries are the foreseeable and proximate result of AAP's racketeering scheme. AAP's categorical safety claims disseminated through pediatricians and public-facing materials induced Mrs. Shaw to consent to vaccination despite her expressed concerns about family history. Those same categorical claims now form the basis for criminal suspicion against her, as investigators assume vaccines could not have caused her children's deaths. Mrs. Shaw's injuries are continuing because AAP continues to disseminate the same false safety claims that induced her consent and that now imperil her liberty. Is that the narrative that she's going to stick with going into trial? I'll tell you what, CBS reports that AAP has tried to get that case tossed out. And to be clear, look, it has been documented that medical authorities say these vaccines and the vaccine schedule are safe and effective. But is this the case that is going to put vaccines on trial in a criminal way? It's such an interesting case with, it's a very sad case, but an interesting legal case, political case, scientific case, if this actually goes to trial. So I want to talk about it. So now I want to bring on my friend Joseph Scott Morgan, not just because I love Joseph Scott Morgan, but because he's a forensic death investigator from Jacksonville State University. He's also host of the Body Bags podcast. When I knew I was going to be covering this, when I was writing it up, I immediately wanted to talk to you because I have to first start here. This is a very interesting case. I think this is going to be a very interesting case if it progresses towards an actual trial. Because the first thing I was wondering, have you ever participated, have you ever studied a case where you have potentially competing causes of death of homicide versus vaccine complications?
Not to the best of my knowledge, Jesse. I really haven't. And, when I was presented with this case, I got to tell you, the first thing that came to mind was Munchausen's. And, that's kind of my default position with many cases, either that or SIDS. But I got to tell you, SIDS, this case chronologically is so far outside of the parameters for SIDS, that shouldn't be on anybody's radar here. So that kind of narrows things down a bit for us.
So let's just back up a second on this.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people are going to have thoughts and comments. Mm-hmm. Is there any scenario where you see someone could die from a vaccine complication that would mimic or look like the symptoms of someone dying from suffocation? Is there any overlap?
I don't know. I think that probably my first stop along this continuum that might bear some resemblance, and this is going to be very, very distal, would probably be any kind of congestion in the lungs, the respiratory system. Beyond that, I think all similarities end. And it's very important, I think, that whoever did the postmortem examination in these cases, whoever gave it consideration, had better been very, very thorough, because this is something that will be looked over for a protracted period of time. As a matter of fact, this is the kind of case, Jesse, that cases that would be presented at like a national pathology meeting, because it's so very odd and bizarre.
Isn't it this putting, not to get political, but isn't this putting vaccines on trial? Isn't this putting vaccine efficacy on trial. I mean, it's a criminal. It would be a criminal trial where essentially, and look, I don't know if this is what the defense is going to do, but I imagine based on what I'm hearing in the commentary from, there's this separate lawsuit. There is this comments from her attorney. Aren't they going to try to prove that these kids died from vaccine complications? And it's going to be trying to show that in a way that I don't think I've ever seen a trial like that before.
I haven't either, particularly you got two. And,
well, that's strange too, right? Like they both die at the exact same time.
Yeah, and that's why I think that's why the police were certainly sniffing around this, because that's going to make it, and you would have had a medical legal consult on this, because do you realize I can't give you the numbers. I'm just kind of throwing this out there. You realize what the odds are of two kids dying simultaneously? Because
even if they're twins,
even if they're twins, that can kind of be excluded. All right. Because what you were talking about a second ago, was what we would term, and this is very popular in the zeitgeist, is vaccine injuries. Right. And that's what we talk about a lot. And look, I'm not saying that there haven't been people that have reacted poorly to vaccines in the past. However, if you're trying to sell me as an old death investigator on the idea that two kids spontaneously die at the same time, I'm going to have a major problem with that. You're going to have to prove that to me. And I mean in very specific terms. And so that's why I'm saying that any kind of examinations that were done, whether it was the gross examination of the remains, that is what we're looking at with the unaided eye, toxicology samples, any kind of cultures that were done, and certainly microscopic stuff relative to the histo exams that we do, where we take bits of the organs and we look at them under the microscope over a period of time, because, that when you do histo exams, that shows inflammatory responses that you can't see with the unaided eye. So you have to put it on scope to take a look at it. And those are, kind of reactive events that you can only assess with histo exams. So all of that's going to play into this, Jesse.
Well, how do they know it's suffocation? When you do an examination, what are the signs that something can be suffocation? And would you be able to know whether it was using some sort of material, a pillow, a blanket, someone's hands? How do you know it's suffocation?
Well, there's a couple of things we look for with suffocation. Obviously, and you and I have talked about this before, we begin to think about the little pinprick hemorrhages in the eyes, petechial hemorrhages, right? And that means that's a pressure-related event where the airway is being blocked to the point and the subject is struggling to breathe. And you have this kind of congestive backup that happens essentially. And you get these little burst vessels in there. And that's many times indicative of some kind of asphyxial death, right? Another thing here, and this happens a lot with children that have been suffocated, say manually, you check, and if everybody at home will just kind of follow along with me here, take the tip of your tongue, you can find that little piece of connective tissue that's your upper lip and your lower lip. It's called the frenulum. Well, if you place a hand over the mouth and someone is struggling, okay, back and forth like that, did you know that the frenulum will rip? It'll tear. And you see that with direct pressure being placed over a hand. Interestingly enough, boxers get this when they get popped in the mouth. But you see it with children that are suffocated. That's why, people will say, well, it's the perfect way to end somebody's life. Well, if you're talking about manual suffocation like this or smothering, with babies are still going to react. Even, we're saying babies 18 months old, they're still going to react. They're going to fight against it. It's that kind of primal brain response that we get. They go into survival mode.
Just to take a step back, have you personally, or have a colleague of yours or anybody you know, ever concluded that a child, adult, died from a vaccine complication, that was the cause of death?
Not in my practice. No, not in my practice as a death investigator in New Orleans and Atlanta. I'm not saying it hasn't happened, because I know of cases where people have had a negative response to vaccines. my big question is how exactly do you get this calculus to work relative to two subjects? Okay, I can understand it a little bit better if you have a standalone individual, but to have two subjects that spontaneously die like this, it's really tough to go down this road intellectually, Jesse.
Now, Joseph, I know that you saw some portion of this lawsuit that she's a part of.
Yes.
This, again, I wonder, is it going to mimic what a defense attorney would argue at a criminal trial? What do you make of that? I mean, if they have the records that the children were brought for medical services and they had the emergency medical services and they had this potentially adverse reaction to the vaccine, how does this affect the analysis?
Well, for me, I think that the big thing I will come back to on this is that how in the world did two distinct individuals, and they're fraternal twins, distinct individuals at the same moment in time go into a distressed situation where it's an end of life event? How exactly does that happen? Because that's problematic. That's problematic for the defendant in this particular case. And I can, dollars to donuts, man, I'm telling you, that's why the police began to sniff around this, because anything that you have relative to a spontaneous event like this, it's going to raise suspicions with the police. It would, and listen, when we have an 18-month-old that dies, just say individual, we're going to go over this case with a fine-tooth comb. We have to arrive at an explanation for death. Is this a vaccine injury? Well, if they're trying to sell this as a single standalone event, I'm going to be more intrigued by that relative to a vaccine injury than I ever would if this is two that simultaneously pass away, Jesse.
What is a battle of experts going to look like if this goes to trial?
I don't know if it'll be the battle of the Titans, but this is what you're going to have. You're going to have, certainly defense is going to offer up pediatric testimony, I think, because it's in that realm. We are all familiar with vaccines, right? We're parents. We were kids at one point in time, believe it or not, and we all went and got vaccines, right? Who gave those vaccines to us? Well, some people went to the health department. Other people went to the family pediatrician, okay? So you're going to have a pediatric specialist that will come on board. Another thing that they're going to have available to them, did you know, and many people don't know this, that there are forensic pathologists out there that specialize in pediatric forensics. So my suspicion is that if the state wants to go the distance with this, they will retain as their own expert someone like this, in addition to the forensic pathologist that did the examination initially. They may even try to draw in their own clinicians. This is separate from forensic practice that will talk about this and either the likelihood or the unlikely nature of this. Somebody that specializes specifically in vaccines, that works in a laboratory, is probably not going to be an MD. It'll probably be a PhD, more than likely. So yeah, and the state can bring the full force of this. It all depends on what kind of appetite they have for it.
I think this is a fascinating case.
Yeah, I do too.
Really do. I think it's going to have a political angle to it. I think it has a criminal angle to it. I think it's going to have a lot of eyeballs on it if it should progress. And if it should progress in a way where it doesn't become immediately clear why this looks like a homicide. In other words, if there's more evidence that comes out, physical evidence from the crime scene, potential crime scene, alleged crime scene, that would document that something happened here, but then you have this kind of sense of doubt, I think this is going to be a really pivotal case in our criminal justice system, in our health system. So I want to keep a careful eye on it. Joseph Scott Morgan, thank you so much for coming on. Check out Body Bags, everybody. You're the best, my friend.
Thank you, buddy.
And that's all we have for you right now here on Sidebar, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. As always, please subscribe on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. You can also check us out on NBC's Peacock as well. If you want to follow me, X, Instagram, my News Nation show, Jesse Weber Live, Monday through Friday, 11 p.m. Eastern. See you next time, everybody.